In the coldest ocean on Earth, spiders grow to the size of dinner plates. A sponge alive today might have started growing before the pyramids were built. This is the Southern Ocean, wrapped around Antarctica, and it breaks a rule that holds almost everywhere else on the planet. Cold does not mean small here, cold means giant. We are diving into a world hiding a squid with eyes wider than a dinner plate, a fish with blood that resists freezing, and a swarm so massive it can be seen from space. If that grabs you, hit subscribe, get ready. Picture the coldest water you have ever touched. Maybe a lake in December, or the ocean on a freezing beach day. Your whole body wants to get out in seconds. Now imagine an entire ocean that cold, all the time, every day, for millions of years. That ocean exists. It circles the bottom of the planet, wrapped around Antarctica like a moat around a frozen castle. Scientists call it the Southern Ocean. Here is the strange part. In most of nature, cold places grow small, slow creatures. Think of the animals in your backyard during winter. Bugs shrink, frogs disappear underground, everything gets quiet and tiny. But flip that idea upside down and drop it into the Southern Ocean, and the opposite happens. Down in that freezing water, some animals do not shrink. They grow to sizes that seem impossible. A spider that could barely be seen without a microscope in warm water turns into something the size of a dinner plate here. A sea creature that would fit in your palm anywhere else grows big enough to fill a bathtub. Scientists have a name for this pattern. They call it polar gigantism, and it shows up again and again the closer you get to Antarctica. Nobody stumbled onto this by accident. Researchers have been diving under the ice for decades, drilling holes through frozen sheets thick enough to drive a truck across, then dropping into water so cold it can freeze exposed skin in minutes. One diver who does this work described the feeling perfectly. He said it is beautiful down there, glowing and quiet, except that you are slowly freezing the entire time. Why would anyone risk that? Because what lives under that ice rewrites what we thought we knew about size and cold. For over a century, the assumption was simple. Cold slows everything down, and slow things stay small. The Southern Ocean proves that assumption wrong over and over. This is a whole ecosystem playing by different rules, not one weird animal with a size glitch. Spiders, worms, shrimp-like creatures, and sponges all grow bigger here than their relatives do almost anywhere else on Earth. Something about this specific ocean, at this specific temperature, flips the switch that normally keeps animals small. Scientists have some strong ideas about why. It has to do with oxygen, of all things, and how cold water holds onto it differently than warm water does. We will get into the exact mechanism soon, and it will change how you think about something as simple as a glass of ice water. But first, meet the animal that first tipped researchers off that something unusual was happening beneath the ice. It does not swim. It barely moves at all, and it looks like nothing you have ever seen crawling around on land. Because once you see what is waiting in the next chapter, you will understand why scientists keep coming back to this frozen water, year after year, generation after generation, chasing one question. How does an ocean this cold grow monsters this big? Somewhere on a coral reef in warm water right now, a sea spider is crawling across a rock. It is so small you would need a magnifying glass to see its legs. Some are barely bigger than the period at the end of this sentence, about 1 millimeter across. Blink, and you would miss one crawling past your foot. Now travel south, past the equator, past the last warm current, down to the edge of Antarctica. The same basic animal is down there too. Same body plan, same 8 spindly legs, same strange design, except here it is not the size of a period. It can grow a leg span of up to 20 inches across. That is roughly the size of a serving tray you would carry food on at a party. Some researchers compare it to the size of a house cat stretched out flat. Same animal, same ocean planet, wildly different size, all because of where it happens to live. These creatures are called sea spiders, and despite the name, they are not actually spiders. They belong to their own strange branch of the arthropod family tree, more distant cousins of spiders than close relatives. But the resemblance is uncanny. Long, thin, jointed legs, a tiny central body. A way of moving that looks like something crawling straight out of a nightmare if that nightmare happened to be filmed in slow motion underwater. Scientists studying Antarctica noticed these giant sea spiders decades ago, and the size difference stopped them in their tracks. It was a jump from a punctuation mark to a dinner plate. Nothing like going from a housefly to a dragonfly. Something about living in the coldest ocean on the planet was allowing, or maybe even forcing, these animals to grow to sizes their warm water relatives could never reach. One research team decided to find out why. They call themselves the sea spider hunters, and their method is about as extreme as their subject. Divers drill through Antarctic sea ice thick enough to support a vehicle, then lower themselves into water that hovers just below freezing. Down there, sunlight filters through the ice in eerie blue beams. Weddell seals chirp somewhere in the distance, an alien sound bouncing through the water, and crawling along the seafloor, in that frozen quiet, are sea spiders the size of a person's outstretched hand. The scientists were not just collecting these creatures to marvel at them. They wanted to solve a real mystery, one that connects to something happening everywhere on Earth right now. If cold water is somehow the secret ingredient behind giant sea spiders, what happens as our oceans slowly warm up? Could that secret ingredient disappear? Could these giants shrink back down to normal size or vanish completely? To answer that, the researchers needed to understand exactly what cold water is doing to these animals on a biological level. It turns out the answer starts with something invisible, something you cannot see or touch, but something every living creature in the ocean depends on to survive. It starts with oxygen, and cold water, it turns out, is hiding more of it than anyone expected. Here is something most people never think about. Water can hold different amounts of oxygen depending on its temperature. Warm water and cold water are not the same when it comes to what they can carry dissolved inside them. Think about a can of soda. Pop it open when it is warm, and it fizzes wildly, losing its gas fast. Pop open a cold can, and it stays fizzy much longer. The gas stays trapped inside the liquid better when things are cold. Ocean water works on a similar principle with oxygen instead of soda bubbles. Cold water can hold more dissolved oxygen than warm water. That is not a guess. It is basic chemistry, the same reason a cold can of soda holds its fizz. And the coastal waters around Antarctica are about as cold as ocean water gets on this entire planet, hovering just below the freezing point of fresh water. Because of that, the oxygen levels in southern ocean water are especially high, some of the richest oxygen conditions found anywhere in the sea. For most of us, more oxygen in the water might sound like a small detail, but for the animals living down there, it might be the single biggest reason they can grow to such enormous sizes. Every living thing needs oxygen to survive. It powers the basic chemical reactions that keep cells alive, the same way gas powers an engine. Bigger bodies need more oxygen just to keep all their cells running. That creates a real problem for large animals in most environments. The bigger you get, the more oxygen your body demands, and eventually, if the environment cannot supply enough, growth simply has to stop. Your body hits a ceiling it cannot break through. But what if the environment itself had extra oxygen to spare? What if the water surrounding an animal was practically overflowing with the one resource that normally limits how big a body can get? That is exactly the situation in the Southern Ocean. The freezing water is not oxygen poor. It is oxygen rich, some of the richest conditions on the planet. For animals living there, that ceiling on growth gets pushed much higher than it would be almost anywhere else. There is simply more of the one thing every cell needs to function. Researchers studying this call it the oxygen temperature hypothesis, one of the leading explanations for why polar gigantism happens at all. Scientists have not fully proven every piece of it yet, and there is still debate about exactly how much oxygen alone can explain. But the basic pattern keeps showing up again and again in study after study. Cold, oxygen-rich water, giant animals. The connection is too consistent to be a coincidence. Extra oxygen on its own is not the whole story, though. There is a second piece of this puzzle, something happening deep inside the bodies of these cold water creatures, something that makes the extra oxygen even easier to use. It has to do with how fast or how slow their bodies actually run, and that second piece might be even stranger than the first. Every living thing burns energy just to stay alive. Your heart beats, your cells repair themselves, your body generates warmth. All of that constant activity is called metabolism, and it runs on oxygen, the same way a car engine runs on gasoline. Here is the twist. Metabolism does not run at the same speed everywhere on Earth. Temperature controls the pace, especially for cold-blooded animals, the ones that cannot generate their own body heat the way humans and other mammals do. For these creatures, body temperature simply matches the temperature of the water around them. In warm water, a cold-blooded animal's metabolism races. Chemical reactions inside its cells speed up, burning through oxygen fast, the way an engine revs harder at higher speeds. But drop that same animal into freezing water and everything slows down. Its metabolism idles low, almost like a car parked with the engine barely running. Slower metabolism means less oxygen gets used up, just keeping the basic systems alive. Now put these two pieces together. The Southern Ocean is already overflowing with oxygen because it is so cold. On top of that, the animals living there have metabolisms running in slow motion because of that same cold. They need less oxygen to survive, and there happens to be more of it available than almost anywhere else in the ocean. It is like filling up a gas tank that barely gets used, because the engine is running on idle nearly all the time. This combination is the leading explanation scientists point to when they talk about polar gigantism: extra oxygen supply, reduced oxygen demand. Both pointing in the exact same direction, both making it possible for a body to keep growing long after it would have hit a wall almost anywhere else on the planet. Picture what this actually means for an animal like the giant sea spider from a few chapters back. Its relative on a warm reef has a metabolism running fast, burning oxygen quickly, hitting its size limit almost immediately. But the Antarctic version has a metabolism running slow, sipping oxygen instead of gulping it, surrounded by water that has plenty to spare. Growth that would be impossible in warm water becomes almost expected down here in the cold. This slow metabolism trick shows up across dozens of unrelated species in Antarctic waters, not just one or two odd exceptions. Worms, shrimp-like creatures, sponges, mollusks, they all seem to benefit from the same basic setup. Slow the engine down, fill the tank up, let growth continue far past where it would normally stop. Scientists are careful here, and so are we. This is one of the strongest explanations researchers have for polar gigantism, but it is not the final word on every single case. Some animals seem to follow this pattern more closely than others, and researchers are still working out exactly why. Nature rarely hands over a single perfect explanation, but there is still one more piece to this puzzle, and it might be the strangest one yet. Some of these giant creatures do not even have lungs or gills or any of the breathing organs you would expect. They get their oxygen a completely different way, a way that should not work at all for something this size, except somehow, out here in the cold, it does. Quick question. How does a sea spider the size of a dinner plate actually breathe? It has no lungs. It has no gills, not the kind you would find on a fish. It has no obvious breathing organs at all. The answer sounds almost too simple to be real. It breathes through its skin. This process is called diffusion, and it is the same basic idea as a drop of food colouring slowly spreading through a glass of water until the colour evens out everywhere. Oxygen molecules in the surrounding water naturally drift into the sea spider's body through its thin outer surface, spreading through its tissues without any pump, without any lungs, without any specialised organ doing the work. The oxygen just moves on its own, from an area with more of it to an area with less. For a tiny animal, diffusion works perfectly fine. A creature the size of a grain of rice does not have far for oxygen to travel to reach every cell inside its body. The distance is short, so the oxygen gets where it needs to go fast enough to keep the whole animal running. But here is the problem. As an animal's body gets bigger, the distance oxygen has to travel by diffusion gets bigger too. In most environments, this puts a hard limit on how large a diffusion-breathing creature can grow. Past a certain size, oxygen simply cannot diffuse fast enough to reach the centre of the body. The animal would suffocate from the inside out, starved of oxygen despite being surrounded by water full of it. This is exactly why diffusion-breathing animals stay tiny almost everywhere else on the planet. The system runs out of room to work as bodies grow larger. It is a built-in size limit, baked directly into the biology. Except in the Southern Ocean, that limit gets pushed dramatically further out. Remember the oxygen, rich cold water from a few chapters back. Remember the slow metabolism that needs far less oxygen to function. Put those two advantages together, and a diffusion-breathing animal can grow far larger than it ever could anywhere warmer, because there is more oxygen available to diffuse in, and the body needs less of it once it gets there. This is likely a major part of why sea spiders specifically hit such extreme sizes in Antarctic waters. Their entire oxygen delivery system depends completely on diffusion, with no backup, no pump, no gills. In warm water, that system caps their size almost immediately. In the Southern Ocean, with extra oxygen flooding in and metabolism running low, that same system can support a leg span stretching nearly 2 feet across. It is a genuinely elegant piece of biology once you see how the pieces click together. A limit that exists almost everywhere on Earth simply does not apply the same way down here, all because of water temperature and its ripple effects on oxygen and metabolism working together. Sea spiders were just the beginning of this pattern, though. Scientists studying the Antarctic seafloor found something else scuttling around down there, something built completely differently from a spider, but following the exact same rule written into its size. This next creature is a crustacean, and in the Southern Ocean, it is nothing like the tiny bugs you might find flipping over a rock at the beach. Flip over a damp rock in your backyard, and you might find a pillbug scurrying away, sometimes called a roly-poly. It curls into a tiny armoured ball when you touch it, barely bigger than a fingernail. That little bug belongs to a group of animals called isopods, close relatives of crabs and lobsters, and they live basically everywhere on Earth, from forests to beaches to the deep ocean floor. Now travel down to the seafloor around Antarctica, and you will find an isopod too. Its name is Glyptonotus antarcticus, and locals in the research community just call it the giant Antarctic isopod. It typically grows to about 3.5 inches long, roughly the length of your thumb held up next to your palm, and in rarer cases it can stretch to nearly 8 inches, close to the length of a dollar bill. Compare that to most isopods worldwide, which usually top out under an inch. This one is built on a completely different scale. It might not sound massive compared to the sea spider from a few chapters ago, but remember the baseline here. Most isopods on this entire planet are smaller than your fingernail. An isopod reaching the length of a dollar bill is not a small step up. It is one of the biggest jumps in size that any isopod species makes anywhere on Earth. This creature is armoured and built like a tank, with rows of spiky legs and a hard shell covering its back. When something threatens it, it raises a few of those spiked legs into the air, almost like it is putting up its fists. It scavenges along the Antarctic seafloor, eating almost anything it comes across, from sea stars to dead animal remains to smaller members of its own species. Yes, it will eat its own kind if the opportunity comes up. Nothing about survival down here is gentle. One especially strange detail about this animal is how it swims. When it needs to move through open water instead of crawling along the bottom, it flips completely upside down and swims that way, legs pointed toward the surface. Nobody fully understands why, though scientists suspect it might have to do with how its eyes are positioned for spotting threats or prey from below. Speaking of eyes, this isopod only has 5 tiny light-sensing structures split between 2 small clusters, an unusual setup compared to most crustaceans, which typically have far more. Even its vision seems built differently down here in the cold and the dark. The giant Antarctic isopod follows the exact same underlying pattern as the sea spider. Freezing water, high oxygen levels, a slow metabolism that stretches out its lifespan and its growth at the same time. This is the rule showing up again, in a completely different branch of the animal kingdom built on a completely different body plan, in the exact same freezing ocean. But compared to what comes next, even this armoured giant starts to look almost ordinary. Because the next creature in the Southern Ocean does not just grow big, it grows old, older than almost anything else alive on this planet today, and it barely moves at all. Somewhere on the seafloor beneath the Ross Sea near Antarctica sits something that looks like a giant stone vase. It does not swim, it does not crawl, it barely moves in any way you could actually watch happening. And yet, this simple-looking shape might be one of the oldest living things on the entire planet. It is called the giant volcano sponge, and its scientific name is Anoxycalyx jubini. It can grow over 6 feet tall, roughly the height of a grown adult standing on their own 2 feet, and its wide, cone-shaped body can stretch nearly 5 feet across at the opening. Divers exploring the seafloor near Antarctica found ones large enough that a full-grown human could actually fit their entire body inside the hollow centre. Here is where this story gets almost impossible to wrap your head around. Scientists studying one of these giant sponges estimated its age using a technique similar to counting tree rings, except sponges do not grow in neat, easy-to-count layers the way trees do. Researchers have to measure incredibly slow growth rates instead and calculate backward from there. Their conclusion was staggering. Some of these sponges may be thousands of years old. Some estimates push toward 15,000 years for the largest individuals, though scientists are honest that this number carries real uncertainty, since nobody has been watching one continuously since it started growing. If even a more conservative estimate is closer to the truth, a giant volcano sponge alive today could still have started growing before the pyramids of Egypt were ever built, before writing existed, before most of human history as we know it even began. Picture that scale for a second. Empires have risen and completely collapsed. Entire languages have been born and gone extinct. And this sponge sitting quietly on the Antarctic seafloor the entire time just kept growing, one tiny fraction of an inch at a time, year after year, century after century. Why does it grow so unbelievably slowly? The same freezing cold water that supercharges oxygen levels for sea spiders and isopods has the opposite looking effect here. It slows this sponge's metabolism down to an almost unimaginable crawl. Less energy used means less growth happening, but it also means far less wear and tear on its body over time. Slow and steady, stretched out across thousands of years instead of dozens. One research team tracked a group of these sponges for over 20 years and documented something wild. For more than 2 decades, the sponges barely grew at all, staying nearly the exact same size the entire time. Then, after a massive iceberg broke away nearby and completely shifted the flow of nutrients through that part of the ocean, some of the sponges suddenly grew rapidly, almost like flipping a switch. It shows these ancient creatures are not frozen statues. They are alive, responding to changes in their environment, just on a timescale that stretches far beyond a single human lifetime. A living thing that might be older than the pyramids, sitting quietly under the ice this entire time. It raises an obvious question. If it has really been alive for thousands of years, how do scientists actually prove that, without simply waiting around to watch it grow? The answer to that question is stranger and more clever than you might expect. You cannot ask a sponge how old it is. It has no rings you can slice open and count, not the way you would with a tree trunk. It has no birth certificate, no written record, nothing obvious marking the passage of time. So how do scientists figure out that a giant Antarctic sponge might be thousands of years old? The main tool is called radiocarbon dating, and the basic idea is genuinely clever. Every living thing on Earth absorbs tiny amounts of a specific type of carbon from its environment while it is alive. That particular type of carbon slowly breaks down at a fixed, predictable rate over time, like a clock that never speeds up or slows down. By measuring how much of it remains in a sample, scientists can calculate roughly how long ago that material actually formed. For a giant sponge, researchers carefully take a small sample from deep within its body, sometimes from its central core, the oldest part of the entire structure. They measure the carbon breakdown inside that sample and use it to estimate when that particular section of the sponge first formed. But that number alone only tells you the age of one specific spot inside the sponge, not the age of the entire living creature. To estimate the sponge's total age, scientists also have to calculate exactly how fast the sponge grows, then use that growth rate to work backward from its full, present-day size all the way down to 0. That is where things get genuinely difficult. One detailed 22-year study found that a very slow-growing Antarctic sponge sometimes added no measurable size at all across the entire study period. 0 growth over more than 2 decades of careful observation. If a sponge can go over 20 years without growing in any noticeable way, imagine trying to calculate how many total centuries, or even millennia, it took to reach a height of 6 feet. This is exactly why age estimates for these sponges carry a wide range, and why honest scientists are quick to point that uncertainty out themselves. One study calculated a smaller sponge, only about 6 inches across, at roughly 440 years old already, based on its measured growth rate. Scale that same math up to the giant sponges that stand over 6 feet tall, and you start reaching estimates in the thousands of years, with some pushing toward that jaw-dropping 15,000-year figure for the largest specimens found. Is 15,000 years locked in as scientific fact? Not exactly. It is a serious, carefully calculated estimate built from real data, but the method has real limitations baked into it, and different sponges likely grow at genuinely different rates depending on their specific environment and food supply. What researchers are confident about is that these giant sponges are almost certainly among the oldest living animals on the entire planet, full stop, regardless of exactly where the true number ultimately lands. An animal that might have started growing before written history began, calculated using the slow decay of carbon atoms and decades of patient underwater observation, is one of the strangest detective stories in all of marine biology. But even a creature this ancient depends completely on something else happening in this ocean, something almost too small to notice at first glance, something that, in staggering enough numbers, becomes one of the most powerful forces in the entire Southern Ocean. For 22 straight years, scientists watching a certain population of Antarctic sponges recorded almost nothing happening. No growth, no new sponges settling onto the seafloor. Just still, quiet stillness, year after year, decade after decade, like watching paint that never quite finishes drying. Then, in the space of just a few years, everything changed. Around 2004, and again closer to 2010, researchers monitoring the same underwater sites suddenly recorded significant new sponge growth appearing where there had been almost none before. Something had shifted dramatically in this frozen environment, and these ancient, painfully slow growing creatures responded almost immediately once conditions changed in their favour. What flipped the switch? A massive iceberg. A truly enormous chunk of ice broke away from a nearby ice shelf and drifted through the region, and in doing so it completely rearranged how nutrients move through that part of the Southern Ocean. Suddenly more food, mainly tiny drifting organisms called phytoplankton, became available to the sponges in that specific area, and these creatures so famously slow, so famously ancient, responded to that opportunity almost as fast as any other animal would. This single event completely reshapes how scientists think about these giant sponges. It would be easy to picture them as frozen, unchanging fixtures, more like underwater statues than living creatures. But this data proves something very different. These sponges are constantly listening to their environment, and their growth is directly tied to food availability, exactly the same as almost every other living creature on Earth. They simply operate on an almost unimaginably slower timescale than we are used to. This also raises a genuinely important question for the future. If a single iceberg breaking loose can trigger a growth spurt this dramatic, what happens as the entire Southern Ocean continues to warm and shift due to broader climate change? Could that completely disrupt the extremely narrow, extremely stable conditions these ancient sponges depend on to survive at all? Researchers are actively studying exactly that question right now, and there is no simple, comfortable answer yet. For now, what we know for certain is this. These sponges are not frozen statues sitting motionless on the seafloor. They are living, responding creatures, just operating on a scale of time that makes a single human lifetime look almost impossibly brief and fleeting by comparison. And their fate is tied directly to something almost too small to notice with the naked eye, drifting through these frozen waters in numbers large enough to be tracked from outer space. That something is about to become the true star of this entire story. It might be the single most important creature in the whole Southern Ocean, and it is barely bigger than your finger. Get ready to meet the animal that feeds practically everything else on this list. Everything you have learned about so far, the giant spiders, the armoured isopods, the ancient sponges, all of it exists inside one massive interconnected food web. And at the very base of that entire web sits an animal so small it barely seems worth mentioning at first. It is called Antarctic krill, and it looks like a tiny translucent shrimp. A fully grown adult reaches about 2.5 inches long, roughly the length of your thumb, and weighs barely more than a gram, lighter than a single paperclip. On its own, one krill is genuinely unremarkable. Small, simple, easy to overlook completely. But krill are never really alone. They live in massive groups called swarms, sometimes packed together so densely that a single cubic meter of water, roughly the size of a large cardboard box, can contain tens of thousands of individual krill swimming shoulder to shoulder. Multiply that density across miles and miles of open ocean, and the numbers start to spiral completely out of control. Krill feed on phytoplankton, those same tiny drifting organisms that triggered the ancient sponge growth spurt from the last chapter. In turn, krill themselves become food for nearly everything larger swimming above them: whales, seals, penguins, fish, seabirds. This tiny, unremarkable-looking creature is quite literally the engine that powers almost the entire Southern Ocean food chain. Here is a comparison that might help this click into place. Imagine every single fast food restaurant on the entire planet suddenly disappeared overnight. Entire supply chains would completely collapse. Millions of jobs would vanish. Countless daily routines would be thrown into total chaos. Now imagine krill disappearing from the Southern Ocean instead. The effect on this specific ecosystem would be even more severe, because almost nothing here has a real backup food source waiting in reserve. Krill live for up to about 6 years, which is genuinely long for a creature this small, another possible sign of that same slowed down, cold water metabolism showing up once again. They grow slowly, they live comparatively long lives for their size, and they gather in numbers that are genuinely difficult for the human brain to picture accurately without seeing it firsthand. Scientists studying krill populations have found something that sounds almost like science fiction, but is completely real, fully documented and measured using actual satellite technology. Some krill swarms grow so massive that you can literally see them from outer space, showing up as enormous, shifting patches of discoloured water spotted by orbiting satellites looking straight down at the planet below. An animal barely bigger than your thumb, visible from space when it gathers together in large enough numbers. That single fact alone should completely change how you picture something this small. But that comparison from earlier, about fast food restaurants disappearing worldwide, was actually being generous to the fast food industry. Because once you see the true staggering scale of a single krill swarm up close, you will realise that comparison barely even scratches the surface of what is really happening beneath these Antarctic waves. Picture standing at one end of a massive shopping mall parking lot, one that stretches on for what feels like forever in every direction. Now imagine that entire parking lot, and hundreds more stretched out beyond it, all packed edge to edge with something alive, swimming, moving together as one enormous coordinated shape. That is roughly what a large Antarctic krill swarm looks like from below the surface, and it is not even close to an exaggeration. Researchers tracking these swarms have documented individual gatherings covering over 170 square miles of open ocean, stretching down more than 600 feet deep beneath the surface. One single swarm recorded by scientists was estimated to contain more than 2 million tons of krill, all swimming together as one massive living, breathing cloud beneath the waves. 2 million tons! That number is so large it barely means anything just sitting there on its own, so let us break it down into something you can actually picture clearly. A fully loaded school bus weighs somewhere around 12 tons. To match the weight of just that single krill swarm, you would need to line up more than 160,000 school buses, bumper to bumper, stretching for hundreds and hundreds of miles down an endless highway. And that staggering total is made up almost entirely of animals smaller than your thumb, all moving together as one. These massive gatherings are called super swarms, and they are genuinely large enough to be tracked and photographed directly from satellites orbiting high above the Earth. Scientists studying ocean colour from space can spot the telltale signature these enormous swarms leave behind on the water's surface, sometimes stretching for dozens of miles in every direction across the open sea. Why do krill gather in numbers this genuinely extreme? Safety plays a massive role in the decision. A single krill floating completely alone in open water is an easy, simple meal for almost any nearby predator. But a krill swimming inside a swarm containing millions, sometimes billions of others becomes a single, nearly invisible piece inside an overwhelming, confusing mass of movement. Predators struggle to lock onto and successfully target just one individual when they are surrounded by countless others moving in perfect unison all around it. There is more happening here than simple safety in numbers, though. Scientists have discovered that these swarms actively move up and down through the water, in a regular daily cycle, roughly every 12 hours, rising toward the surface at night to feed and sinking back down into deeper water during the day to avoid predators hunting by sunlight. This constant, massive vertical movement actually helps physically mix nutrients throughout different layers of the ocean, meaning krill are not just passively floating along with the current, they are actively, meaningfully shaping the ocean environment around them. An animal this small should not be capable of influencing an entire ocean's chemistry and nutrient flow, and yet, in numbers this genuinely staggering, it absolutely does, every single day, on a completely predictable schedule. But even a number as massive as 2 million tons in a single swarm is not the true, full scale of the krill population living in the Southern Ocean. That number only represents one swarm, spotted and measured at one specific moment in time. The full picture, once scientists add every single krill together across the entire ocean, becomes something that sounds almost too strange to actually be true. Here is a fact that sounds completely made up the very first time you hear it, but it comes directly from careful, measured scientific research. The total combined weight of every single Antarctic krill alive in the ocean right now is estimated to be greater than the combined weight of every single human being currently alive on planet Earth. Every person, all 8 billion of us combined. Krill as a species still outweigh that entire number. Scientists estimate the total krill population at somewhere between 300 and 500 million tons spread out across the Southern Ocean. For comparison, the combined weight of every human currently alive is estimated at somewhere close to that same range on the lower end, meaning krill likely match, and in many calculations comfortably exceed, the weight of our entire species, all from an animal roughly the length of your thumb. Let that number really sink in for a second before moving forward. One single animal species, individually so small and seemingly insignificant that a single one could rest quietly in the palm of your hand, collectively outweighs 8 billion human beings, our skyscraper's worth of combined muscle, bone, and body mass stacked up against theirs. How is a number this genuinely enormous even remotely possible? It comes down almost entirely to sheer, staggering quantity. Researchers estimate there are more than 700 trillion adult krill alive in the Southern Ocean at any given moment. 700 trillion. If you tried counting that number out loud, one number every single second without ever stopping to rest, it would take you well over 20 million years to reach the final count. This staggering quantity connects directly back to that oxygen-rich slow metabolism advantage we explored several chapters ago. Cold water supports enormous amounts of biological life, not always by making individual animals bigger, but sometimes by supporting truly incredible sheer numbers of smaller creatures instead. Krill do not need to grow to the size of the giant sea spider to become one of the most dominant, influential forces in this entire ecosystem. They simply needed to multiply into numbers that are almost genuinely impossible for the human brain to fully picture or comprehend. This also explains exactly why krill sit at the true center of the entire Southern Ocean food web. When one single species contains this much raw biomass, this much stored available energy, virtually every other animal in the surrounding ecosystem eventually evolves some direct way to tap into that resource. Whales evolved specialized mouths built specifically to filter krill directly out of open water in massive quantities. Seals developed teeth shaped in ways that let them strain krill efficiently. Penguins learned to dive and hunt them with remarkable precision and speed. An animal weighing barely more than a paperclip, individually somehow ends up outweighing our entire species collectively and shaping the survival of nearly every other creature living in this frozen ocean. But raw numbers and total weight only tell part of this story. To really understand why krill matter this much, we need to watch exactly what happens when the ocean's largest predators show up looking for their very next meal. Every ecosystem on Earth has a foundation, some core resource that everything else ultimately depends on to survive. In a forest, it might be sunlight hitting the leaves of countless trees. In a grassland, it might be the grass itself feeding herds of grazing animals. In the Southern Ocean, that entire foundation rests on the shoulders, or rather the tiny swimming legs, of Antarctic krill. Scientists studying this ecosystem in careful detail have calculated just how much krill different groups of predators consume across an average year, and the raw numbers are almost impossible to fully process. Seals alone consume somewhere between 63 and 130 million tons of krill every single year. Whales add another 34 to 43 million tons on top of that. Seabirds eat somewhere between 15 and 20 million tons. Squid consume even more than the seals do, somewhere between 30 and 100 million tons annually. Fish species eat another 10 to 20 million tons on top of all of that. Add every single one of those numbers together, and you get a truly staggering total, somewhere between 150 and over 300 million tons of krill consumed by the wider ecosystem in a single year alone. Here is the part that should genuinely blow your mind though. Even after supporting that level of consumption year after year, decade after decade, the total krill population somehow keeps itself replenished and stable. This works specifically because krill reproduce quickly enough and grow in numbers so genuinely enormous that they can sustainably support this level of predation without simply collapsing under the constant pressure. This is precisely why scientists refer to krill as a true keystone species. Picture a stone archway built the traditional way, with each individual stone leaning carefully against its neighbours for support. Remove most of the stones, and the entire structure might still somehow survive, just barely holding together. But remove the single keystone sitting right at the very top centre, and the entire archway comes crashing straight down. Krill function exactly like that single keystone for the Southern Ocean's entire food web. Nearly everything else depends directly, or indirectly, on their continued presence and stability. Without krill, penguins would lose their primary, most reliable food source. Seals would need to somehow find an entirely different way to survive. Whales that migrate thousands of miles specifically to feast on massive krill swarms would arrive to find nothing waiting for them at all. The full ripple effect would spread outward through virtually every single level of this ecosystem, touching almost every species living here in some meaningful way. This is exactly why scientists monitor krill populations so carefully and consistently year after year. They are not simply tracking one interesting species out of scientific curiosity or academic interest. They are tracking the literal foundation that the entire Southern Ocean ecosystem is built directly on top of. Now that you understand exactly how important krill truly are, it is time to watch what happens when the single largest animal to ever exist on planet Earth shows up specifically looking for a meal made almost entirely of these tiny creatures. Get ready to witness an animal eating on a scale that will make even the krill swarm numbers from earlier look almost small by direct comparison. The blue whale is the largest animal to have ever existed on planet Earth, larger even than the biggest dinosaurs that ever roamed dry land. An adult blue whale can stretch up to 100 feet long, roughly the length of 3 school buses parked end to end in a single line, and can weigh close to 200 tons. An animal this genuinely massive needs a truly enormous amount of food just to survive and function day to day. And its primary, preferred meal, in the Southern Ocean specifically, is almost entirely made up of Antarctic krill. Here is a number that sounds completely impossible the very first time you hear it, but comes directly from careful scientific study. A single blue whale can consume up to 3.6 million krill in a single day. 3.6 million in one single day. Let us try to actually picture that scale properly. If you personally sat down and ate one single krill every single second without ever once stopping, it would take you more than 40 straight days of non-stop eating to reach that same total that one blue whale casually finishes before a single day is even over. How does an animal even manage to eat on a scale this genuinely extreme? Blue whales do not hunt or chase down krill one at a time the way a shark might chase a single fish. Instead, they swim directly through a dense krill swarm with their enormous mouths held wide open, taking in massive amounts of water and krill together in one single motion. Then, using specialized comb-like structures inside their mouths called baleen, they filter all of that water back out, trapping the krill safely behind while the excess water simply drains away. This single filtering method allows a blue whale to capture staggering quantities of krill in one single efficient motion, over and over again, hour after hour, throughout an entire feeding day spent almost completely submerged. Blue whales specifically migrate to the Southern Ocean because of the sheer reliable abundance of krill gathered here in such massive, predictable numbers. They spend roughly 6 straight months of the year almost entirely focused on eating, building up thick layers of fat reserves before eventually migrating thousands of miles north again to breed. During that long migration north, they typically eat very little food at all, meaning those 6 intense months of non-stop Antarctic feeding have to sustain their enormous bodies for the rest of an entire year. This directly explains why krill abundance matters so profoundly to blue whale survival specifically. Without those massive, dependable krill swarms gathered here in the Southern Ocean, the largest animal ever to exist on this entire planet would simply have no reliable way to fuel a body this genuinely enormous. But blue whales are filter feeders, calmly swimming through swarms and straining out their food with ease and patience. Not every predator hunting in these frozen waters relies on that same gentle, passive method. Some hunt with real speed, real precision, and real aggression. Meet the next predator on this list, and this one hunts penguins. Not every hunter in the Southern Ocean simply filters food peacefully out of open water. Some actively chase, ambush, and physically overpower their prey with real speed and real aggression. And one of the most feared, most effective hunters in this entire frozen ecosystem is the leopard seal. Leopard seals earn their name honestly. Their skin is covered in dark, distinctive spots, similar in overall pattern to the big cat they are named after, and just like their land-based namesake, they are genuinely powerful, genuinely efficient predators. An adult leopard seal can grow up to about 10 feet long and weigh over 1,000 pounds, roughly the weight of a fully grown horse, but built specifically for speed and precision underwater, instead of running across open land. Their jaws are lined with sharp, specialized teeth, built for 2 very different, distinct jobs. Some teeth are made for gripping and tearing into larger prey. Others are specifically shaped for straining massive quantities of krill directly out of open water, similar in basic concept to the blue whale's filtering system from the last chapter, just on a dramatically smaller physical scale. This dual-purpose design means leopard seals eat an unusually wide, varied range of different food sources. Krill actually makes up a significant portion of their overall diet, similar to many other predators living in this ecosystem. But leopard seals are also fully capable of hunting and successfully bringing down much larger prey when the right opportunity presents itself, including other seals, various fish species, and one animal in particular that most people specifically associate with the Antarctic region: penguins. Leopard seals are patient, careful ambush hunters. They frequently wait quietly near the edges of ice floes, staying almost completely motionless and hidden just below the water's surface, watching closely for the exact right moment to strike with speed and precision. Penguins entering the water to feed have to swim directly past these waiting predators, and that specific moment, right at the boundary between solid ice and open water, is widely considered one of the single most dangerous, high-risk moments in an entire penguin's daily life. This predator and prey relationship has become genuinely famous in nature documentaries, specifically because it demonstrates, in vivid, dramatic detail, exactly how intense survival truly is in this frozen ecosystem. Penguins have to enter the water to find food for themselves and their own chicks waiting back on land. But entering that water means risking a direct encounter with one of the ocean's most effective, most patient hunters, waiting quietly just beneath the surface. Leopard seals themselves are a genuinely powerful direct example of that same familiar pattern from earlier in this story. Cold water, high oxygen levels, a body built for sustained speed and precision. They are proof that this ecosystem's advantages do not only build slow, gentle giants like sponges or filter-feeding whales. Sometimes this exact same environment builds fast, genuinely aggressive apex predators instead. But leopard seals are not the top hunters in this particular ocean. There is one predator here that hunts in coordinated, organized teams, using tactics so genuinely clever that scientists still study them closely today, fascinated by exactly how intelligent this behavior truly is. Picture a single penguin standing at the very edge of a solid ice floe, staring directly down into dark, freezing water. Its chicks are waiting back on land, hungry and depending completely on it to return successfully with food. But the water below is not empty or safe. Somewhere beneath that surface, a leopard seal may already be waiting patiently, watching, completely motionless. This single moment, right at the direct boundary between solid ice and open water, represents one of the most tense, high-stakes decision points in this entire frozen ecosystem. Scientists studying penguin behavior have documented genuinely fascinating group strategies these birds use specifically to manage this constant, ever-present risk. Penguins frequently gather together in groups at the water's edge, sometimes hesitating together for several long minutes before any single bird actually commits to diving in. Some researchers believe this hesitation happens because no individual penguin wants to be the very first one to enter potentially dangerous water. Eventually, once enough time passes, or once one especially bold penguin finally makes the first move, the entire group frequently dives in together, all at nearly the exact same moment. This specific behaviour offers a meaningful survival advantage. A leopard seal waiting quietly below can only successfully target one single penguin at a time. When an entire group enters the water together in one sudden coordinated motion, the odds of any one specific individual bird actually becoming that seal's target drop significantly, simply through sheer safety found in numbers. Once penguins are safely in open water, their entire personality and behaviour shifts almost immediately. On land, penguins waddle along somewhat clumsily, tipping side to side with each careful step. But in open water, they transform into remarkably fast, agile swimmers, capable of reaching speeds up to roughly 15 miles per hour, and executing sudden, sharp turns that can help them successfully evade an incoming predator at the very last possible second. Leopard seals, in turn, have evolved their own specific counter-strategies to overcome this exact evasive behaviour. They frequently patrol specific areas repeatedly, learning and memorising predictable penguin entry points along the ice edge over time. Some documented encounters even show leopard seals using deliberate ambush ice positioning, hiding directly underneath overhanging ledges of ice where approaching penguins genuinely cannot see them coming until it is already far too late to safely react. This constant, ongoing back and forth between penguins and leopard seals represents a real, living evolutionary arms race playing out directly in front of researchers today. Every single generation of penguins that survives passes along slightly better evasion instincts and behaviours to their offspring. Every generation of leopard seals that successfully hunts refines its own ambush and pursuit techniques in turn. Neither species ever fully gains a total permanent advantage over the other, because both sides keep adapting continuously in direct response to the other's evolving strategies. This entire dynamic captures something genuinely important about the Southern Ocean as a whole. It is not simply an environment that produces giant, oversized creatures through cold water and abundant oxygen. It is also an environment that produces genuinely intense, high-stakes, survival drama, playing out along the razor-thin edge between solid ice and open, freezing water every single day. But even leopard seals answer to something else in this ecosystem. There is one predator here that hunts in coordinated, highly organized groups using tactics so genuinely clever and deliberate that scientists still travel here specifically to study them, endlessly fascinated by exactly how intelligent this cooperative behavior truly is. Killer whales, also known as orcas, are widely recognized as one of the smartest, most socially complex animals on the entire planet, and in the Southern Ocean specifically, that raw intelligence gets channeled directly into genuinely sophisticated, deliberate group hunting strategies. Unlike many solitary ocean predators that hunt entirely alone, orcas in Antarctic waters frequently hunt in coordinated, tightly organized groups called pods. These pods can include several closely related individuals working together in careful, deliberate unison, and researchers studying their behavior have documented specific hunting techniques that genuinely seem to require real planning, real communication, and real cooperation between multiple animals. One particularly well-documented example involves orcas hunting seals that are resting safely on floating pieces of ice. Instead of simply attacking directly from below, several orcas will swim together in careful, tight formation and create a large, powerful wave specifically designed to physically wash the resting seal directly off its ice floe and into the open water below, where the orcas can then much more easily reach and successfully capture it. This specific hunting technique requires multiple animals working together with real precision and real timing, A single orca acting entirely alone genuinely cannot generate enough physical force to reliably wash a seal off solid ice using this method. But several orcas coordinating their movements together, approaching from the same careful direction at nearly the exact same moment, can generate a wave powerful enough to genuinely accomplish it. Scientists studying this specific behavior believe orcapods actually teach and pass down these sophisticated hunting techniques across different generations. Younger, less experienced orcas frequently observe more experienced adults performing this exact hunting method repeatedly, and over time they gradually learn to participate directly and eventually lead these coordinated hunts themselves. This represents a genuine form of learned culture passed down within these specific animal populations, not simply pure biological instinct working alone. Different orca populations around Antarctica have also developed distinctly different hunting specialties and preferred prey depending on their specific local environment and food availability. Some populations focus heavily on hunting seals using techniques similar to the wave washing method described above. Others specialize more heavily in hunting fish, or even occasionally hunting large whales when the right opportunity presents itself. This kind of specialized regional variation is genuinely rare in the wider animal kingdom and suggests real cultural learning and transmission happening within these specific whale populations over successive generations. Orcas represent yet another clear, powerful example of that same Southern Ocean pattern, showing up once again, just expressed in a completely different way this time. Here the advantage is raw, coordinated intelligence and genuine teamwork, refined and sharpened by the specific hunting demands of this uniquely extreme, resource-rich frozen environment, standing apart from the giant sea spider's raw size or the ancient sponge's raw age. The wave-washing hunting technique described here is genuinely one of the most visually striking, dramatic predator behaviors ever documented on camera in the Southern Ocean, and it reveals something else entirely fascinating about how this specific ecosystem actually works. Sometimes, the single most dangerous predator in the entire ocean is not necessarily the biggest individual animal in the water. Sometimes, it is simply the smartest, most coordinated group working together in perfect practiced unison. Picture a seal resting peacefully and safely on a solid floating piece of Antarctic ice, apparently completely safe from any predator lurking somewhere in the water below. Then, without a single moment of clear warning, the water around that ice floe suddenly rises and surges violently, and the seal is abruptly, forcefully washed directly off the ice and straight into the open freezing water. This is the wave-washing hunting technique in genuine action, and it stands as one of the most genuinely remarkable examples of coordinated animal behavior ever documented anywhere on Earth. Researchers who have carefully studied this specific behavior in close detail describe an almost eerily precise coordinated process. A group of orcas will first slowly, carefully approach a targeted ice floe together, frequently swimming in a tight, deliberate formation. Then, at what genuinely appears to be a specific coordinated signal between them, they will all dive together and swim rapidly straight toward the ice floe from the exact same general direction, generating a single powerful wave through their combined synchronized motion. That wave physically strikes the ice floe with enough combined force to either completely break it apart or simply wash the resting seal directly off the surface entirely. Either outcome achieves the exact same basic goal for the orcas. The seal ends up in open water, where it becomes dramatically more vulnerable to a direct successful attack. What makes this particular behavior so genuinely fascinating to researchers is the clear, obvious evidence of real coordination and advanced planning involved. The orcas do not simply attack randomly or chaotically. They appear to specifically assess the size and thickness of a given ice floe first, adjust their exact approach angle and overall group formation accordingly, and then execute the entire washing maneuver with a level of precision that genuinely suggests real communication happening between the individual whales beforehand. Some documented hunts even show orcas apparently taking specific, distinct roles within the overall group. Some individuals seem to focus primarily on generating the wave itself, while others simultaneously position themselves strategically nearby, ready to intercept the targeted seal the moment it enters open water. This kind of role-based division of labour during a single hunt is exceptionally rare across the wider animal kingdom and stands as further, compelling evidence of just how intelligent and socially sophisticated these specific animals truly are. This hunting technique also demonstrates something genuinely important about survival, more broadly in the Southern Ocean as a whole. Being large offers real, undeniable advantages here, as we have already seen repeatedly throughout this story. But being smart, and specifically being able to cooperate effectively with other members of your own species, can prove to be an equally powerful, equally decisive survival advantage in this exact same challenging environment. The orca hunting techniques documented here represent some of the clearest, most well-studied examples of genuine animal culture and learned behaviour found anywhere in the natural world. Young orcas growing up within these specific pods learn this exact technique gradually over time by carefully watching experienced adults perform it repeatedly, then slowly participating themselves as their own skills, timing, and confidence steadily improve. We have now met the fastest hunters, the smartest hunters, and the largest filter feeders swimming through this frozen ocean. But there is still one more predator waiting beneath the ice, one built to survive water so genuinely cold that its blood itself would normally freeze completely solid inside its body. Meet the fish that evolved its own built-in, natural antifreeze. Water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. The ocean surrounding Antarctica frequently sits right around, or even slightly below, that exact same temperature, kept from actually solidifying completely because ocean salt lowers water's overall freezing point slightly, compared to pure fresh water. For nearly any other fish species on Earth, swimming continuously in water this genuinely cold would be a fatal, immediate death sentence. Ice crystals would begin forming directly inside their blood and body tissues, causing catastrophic, irreversible cellular damage almost instantly. And yet, several fish species have successfully evolved to live their entire lives here, in some of the coldest ocean water found anywhere on this planet. Their secret weapon is a genuinely remarkable biological adaptation called antifreeze glycoproteins. These are specialized proteins that circulate directly through the fish's bloodstream, and they work by physically binding directly onto tiny forming ice crystals the very moment they first begin to appear inside the body. Once bound, these specialized proteins effectively stop those ice crystals from growing any further or spreading deeper into surrounding body tissue, essentially acting as a built-in, internal safeguard against freezing solid from the inside out. This adaptation shows up across an entire specific group of Antarctic fish species, and it stands as one of the most well-studied, most celebrated examples of extreme evolutionary adaptation found anywhere in the natural world. Scientists have been closely studying these specific antifreeze proteins for decades now, and the discovery has even helped directly inspire real-world applications and research in fields as varied as frozen food preservation and modern organ transplant medicine. One particular group of Antarctic fish species known as icefish takes this cold adaptation to an even more genuinely extreme level. These fish almost completely lack hemoglobin, the specific molecule responsible for carrying oxygen and giving blood its familiar deep red colour in nearly every other vertebrate animal on Earth. Their blood runs nearly clear as a direct result. This might sound like it should be a serious, even fatal disadvantage, but it turns out that cold Antarctic water already holds so much dissolved oxygen naturally, the exact same oxygen advantage we explored several chapters ago, that these fish can survive and thrive perfectly well without needing hemoglobin at all to transport it efficiently through their bodies. Living successfully in water, this genuinely cold requires an entire interconnected suite of specialized adaptations working together in careful harmony, not simply one single evolutionary trick operating in isolation. Antifreeze proteins prevent the fish from freezing solid. Reduced or eliminated need for hemoglobin takes direct advantage of the ocean's naturally high oxygen content. Slowed metabolism, that same familiar pattern we have now seen repeated across nearly every single animal in this entire story, reduces overall energy demand significantly. These specialized fish represent living proof that the Southern Ocean does not just support giant creatures or genuinely intelligent hunters. It also actively demands entirely new categories of specialized biological survival tools, adaptations found almost nowhere else across the wider animal kingdom, simply because the specific challenge of surviving here is so genuinely extreme and unforgiving. One particular fish species from this exact same specialized group does not just survive here quietly in the background, it actively hunts. and it has grown large enough to become one of the true dominant predators in this entire frozen ocean. The Southern Ocean has no great white sharks patrolling its waters, and it has no tiger sharks either. The water here is simply too cold for most shark species to survive and thrive successfully. But every ocean ecosystem on Earth genuinely needs a large, dominant predator sitting near the very top of its food chain, and in Antarctic waters specifically, one particular fish species has evolved to directly fill that exact ecological role instead. Meet the Antarctic toothfish. This is a genuinely large fish, growing up to about 5 feet 7 inches long and weighing as much as 300 pounds, making it easily twice the size of the next largest fish species found anywhere in Antarctic waters. It is a powerful, genuinely capable predator, feeding on a wide variety of smaller fish, squid, and various other marine creatures found throughout this frozen ecosystem. What makes the Antarctic toothfish especially interesting to researchers is a specific physical adaptation that directly allows it to fill this particular ecological role so effectively. Most fish species need to keep swimming continuously, or rely heavily on a swim bladder filled with gas, just to maintain their position steadily in open water without constantly sinking toward the bottom. The Antarctic toothfish instead achieves something called neutral buoyancy, meaning it can float steadily and effortlessly at a chosen depth in open water without expending significant additional energy just to stay in place. This particular adaptation is genuinely rare among fish species. The Antarctic toothfish accomplishes it partly by developing an unusually high percentage of lipid, essentially fat, distributed carefully throughout its body tissue, which is naturally less dense than the surrounding extremely cold seawater around it. This specific adaptation lets it comfortably patrol open water hunting for prey, functioning very similarly to how sharks operate as efficient, wide-ranging apex predators in warmer oceans elsewhere around the world. The Antarctic toothfish also relies heavily on specialized sensory organs specifically adapted for hunting successfully in the dim, heavily filtered light found beneath thick Antarctic sea ice, and in the genuinely deep pitch-dark water found further offshore. Since sunlight barely penetrates through ice-covered water even during peak Antarctic summer, this fish depends significantly less on eyesight alone compared to many other predator species, relying instead on other specialized senses to successfully detect and track down potential prey nearby. Scientists studying the Antarctic toothfish estimate that fully grown adults can live for several decades, another clear, consistent example of that now familiar Southern Ocean pattern of slowed metabolism directly translating into significantly extended overall lifespan. Slow and steady clearly seems to be the winning long-term survival strategy again and again throughout this entire frozen ecosystem, showing up in creature after creature. This particular fish also happens to sit directly at the exact center of one of the single most dramatic, genuinely fascinating predator relationships found anywhere in the entire Southern Ocean. Because the Antarctic toothfish is not simply a hunter operating alone here, it is also, quite regularly, becoming prey itself, and the animal actively hunting it is one of the strangest, most mysterious creatures on this entire list. It has eyes larger than dinner plates, and it lives its entire life in complete total darkness. Deep beneath the surface of the Southern Ocean, far below where any sunlight can ever reach, something is watching, quietly and patiently, through eyes larger than almost any other eyes found anywhere across the entire animal kingdom. Meet the colossal squid. This is one of the largest invertebrate animals ever recorded anywhere on Earth. One confirmed specimen, weighed and carefully measured by researchers, tipped the scales at nearly 500 kilograms, or just over 1,000 pounds, roughly the weight of a small car, and measured about 15 feet long from end to end. And its eyes, specifically, measured roughly 10.5 inches across, close to the width of an actual dinner plate. That makes them the largest eyes ever recorded anywhere in the entire animal kingdom, larger than the eyes of any whale, any shark, or any other creature scientists have ever carefully documented and measured. Why would any animal possibly need eyes this genuinely enormous? The colossal squid lives its entire life in near total darkness, far below where sunlight can ever meaningfully penetrate. Down there, even the faintest, most subtle flicker of a light becomes genuinely significant information. Larger eyes can gather and process more available light more effectively, allowing this animal to detect movement and shapes in conditions that would otherwise seem like complete, impenetrable blackness to nearly any other creature. Some researchers believe these massive eyes evolved specifically to detect one very particular kind of movement in the surrounding darkness. Sperm whales, one of the colossal squid's primary natural predators, sometimes generate faint traces of bioluminescent light while swimming rapidly through deep water, essentially disturbing tiny light-producing organisms as they move. A colossal squid equipped with genuinely massive eyes might be able to detect that extremely faint telltale glow from a significant distance away, giving it valuable, potentially life-saving extra time to react and attempt an escape before a hunting predator gets close enough to strike successfully. The colossal squid's overall body is also built noticeably differently compared to its close relative, the giant squid. While a giant squid tends to be noticeably longer overall, largely due to its significantly longer, more slender feeding tentacles, the colossal squid is considerably bulkier and heavier throughout its main body, giving it a distinctly different, more robust overall shape and structure. Very little is actually known for certain about how colossal squid behave in their natural deep-sea environment, mainly because live specimens are exceptionally rarely encountered and almost never observed directly and safely in their natural undisturbed habitat. Nearly everything researchers currently understand about this specific species comes from a relatively small handful of specimens that were accidentally caught in fishing nets or occasionally recovered from the stomachs of larger deep-diving predators that had previously eaten them. This makes the colossal squid one of the most genuinely mysterious large animals still alive on planet Earth today. A creature large enough to weigh as much as a small car, hiding somewhere deep in the darkest parts of the Southern Ocean, and yet still remaining almost completely unknown and unobserved by human science. But those genuinely massive eyes are only the very beginning of this particular creature's story, because the way this animal actually survives and hunts down there in the crushing deep sea darkness is even stranger and even more surprising than its unusual appearance alone might suggest. At first glance, it seems like a genuine contradiction. Why would any animal evolve eyes this large, this genuinely powerful, specifically to live somewhere so dark that eyesight itself would seem almost completely useless most of the time? The colossal squid's massive eyes only make real, practical sense once you understand exactly how this animal actually hunts down there in the crushing deep sea darkness. The colossal squid is widely believed to be what scientists call an ambush predator. Rather than actively swimming around chasing down prey across long distances the way many other ocean hunters typically do, it is thought to remain largely still and motionless in open water, patiently waiting for potential prey or approaching predators to eventually come within striking range on their own. This particular hunting strategy directly connects to something we explored several chapters back regarding the colossal squid's remarkably slow, energy-conserving metabolism. Researchers studying this specific species estimate that a fully grown adult weighing around 500 kilograms may need only about 30 grams of food per day to comfortably survive and function normally. 30 grams is roughly the weight of a small chicken egg. An animal weighing over 1,000 pounds surviving comfortably on an amount of food roughly equivalent to a single egg's weight, spread across an entire day. This genuinely extreme metabolic efficiency directly allows for a patient, low-energy ambush hunting strategy. The colossal squid simply cannot afford to actively chase prey across long distances the way a faster, more energy-hungry predator might. Instead, it waits, conserving nearly all of its available energy, relying almost entirely on those genuinely massive eyes to detect potential prey or looming danger from as far away as physically possible. Those eyes are specifically thought to be tuned toward detecting bioluminescence, the natural light produced by many different deep-sea creatures as they move steadily through the water. In a genuinely dark environment like this, bioluminescent light becomes one of the single most valuable, reliable sources of usable information available to any animal living down there. A creature capable of detecting even the faintest possible traces of that light from a significant distance away gains a real, meaningful, potentially life-saving advantage. whether it happens to be actively hunting for its very next meal, or is instead trying desperately to avoid becoming someone else's. This combination of a slow, patient, ambush-based hunting strategy, paired directly with genuinely enormous, highly sensitive eyes, represents a remarkably different overall survival approach compared to nearly every other predator we've already explored so far throughout this entire story. The leopard seal hunts using pure speed and precision, the orca hunts using coordinated intelligence and genuine teamwork. The colossal squid instead hunts using patience, stillness, and heightened, specialized sensory perception, conserving as much energy as possible while waiting for the exact right moment to strike. Different strategies, all built and refined by the exact same fundamental Southern Ocean advantages we have explored throughout this entire story. Cold water, abundant available oxygen, slowed, energy-efficient metabolism stretched out across an entire lifetime. But the colossal squid does not spend its entire life sitting perfectly still and waiting patiently in open water. Sometimes this genuinely enormous creature actively hunts down one very specific, familiar prey species, one we have actually already met earlier in this exact story. And the resulting encounter between these two animals has become one of the single most genuinely famous predator battles anywhere in the entire Southern Ocean. Imagine an animal weighing over 1,000 pounds that barely has to move at all to comfortably survive from one day to the next. That is genuinely accurately the reality of the colossal squid's day-to-day existence, and it reveals something profoundly important about exactly how life manages to succeed and thrive in the extreme, crushing depths of the Southern Ocean. We already touched briefly on the colossal squid's genuinely remarkable metabolic efficiency in the last chapter, but the true scale of it deserves a much closer, more careful look. Researchers estimate that an adult colossal squid needs only about 30 grams of food each day to survive comfortably. To put that number into real, tangible perspective, a single chicken egg typically weighs around 50 grams. This means a creature large enough to weigh as much as a small car can survive comfortably on daily food intake that adds up to noticeably less than one single egg. How is a ratio this genuinely extreme even biologically possible? Nearly everything comes back once again to that same core combination of advantages we have carefully traced throughout this entire story so far. Cold water slows metabolism dramatically. Slower metabolism means significantly reduced overall energy demand. Reduced energy demand means the animal simply does not need to actively hunt, or move nearly as often or as aggressively as a faster, more energy-hungry predator living somewhere else might need to. This creates a genuinely fascinating overall lifestyle. The colossal squid is thought to spend much of its adult life relatively motionless, conserving energy, waiting patiently for either potential prey or approaching danger to eventually come within range on its own. When it does finally need to move or strike, it can do so, but the vast majority of its time is likely spent in this genuinely slow, patient, low-energy state instead. Compare this directly to a shark swimming continuously through warmer ocean water, needing to actively hunt fairly regularly just to fuel its significantly faster metabolism and stay alive. The colossal squid operates on a completely different overall timescale entirely, one that fundamentally could not exist successfully in warmer water, where faster metabolic rates would demand dramatically more frequent hunting and feeding just to survive. This slow, low-energy lifestyle also likely helps directly explain why colossal squid remain so genuinely difficult for scientists to study up close. An animal that rarely moves, rarely actively hunts, and spends most of its life patiently waiting in the crushing deep-sea darkness is naturally going to be extremely difficult to successfully locate, track, or observe directly, even with modern deep-sea research technology and equipment. Nearly everything we currently understand scientifically about colossal squid behavior comes from analyzing the small handful of specimens that have been accidentally recovered over the years, mostly caught unintentionally in fishing gear, or occasionally recovered from the stomach contents of larger predators that had previously eaten them. Each new specimen adds another small, valuable piece to an overall picture that still remains genuinely significantly incomplete even today. But even a creature this genuinely patient and energy conserving eventually has to actively hunt for real food at some point. And when it finally does strike, it goes after one very particular prey species with a level of aggression that genuinely surprises even experienced researchers who have studied it closely. Deep in Antarctic waters, fishing crews searching specifically for Antarctic toothfish have documented something genuinely strange happening again and again over the years. Their carefully baited fishing lines, stretching hundreds of feet down into the crushing deep-sea darkness below, sometimes come back up with their catch mysteriously missing, or partially eaten, or occasionally damaged in ways that clearly suggest something genuinely massive was directly involved. The culprit, according to careful scientific investigation, is very likely the colossal squid. Researchers studying colossal squid diet and hunting behaviour have found genuinely compelling evidence that these animals regularly target Antarctic toothfish as a significant primary food source. One detailed scientific study specifically examining thousands of toothfish caught commercially over several years found that dozens of individual fish showed clear, unmistakable physical evidence of colossal squid attacks, ranging from visible sucker marks left directly on their skin to genuinely serious, sometimes fatal physical injuries. This finding genuinely surprised many researchers at the time. The Antarctic toothfish, as we already learned a couple chapters back, is itself a genuinely large, powerful predator, easily reaching over 5 feet long and weighing as much as 300 pounds. It is not remotely a small, easy, or defenseless target for any predator to successfully take down, and yet the colossal squid, despite its notably slow, patient, energy-conserving lifestyle, apparently hunts this specific fish regularly and successfully enough to leave clear, measurable evidence behind across an entire commercial fishing industry's worth of catch records. Some documented encounters go noticeably further than simple predation alone. Fishing crews have reported specific instances of colossal squid apparently intercepting and directly stealing toothfish that were already firmly hooked and struggling on active fishing lines, essentially opportunistically taking advantage of an already weakened, vulnerable, and conveniently struggling target. This behaviour genuinely suggests real intelligence and adaptability, taking direct advantage of an unusual, unexpected opportunity, rather than relying purely on fixed, unchanging predatory instinct alone. This particular predator and prey relationship reveals something genuinely important about how interconnected this entire ecosystem truly is. The colossal squid, that patient ambush hunter equipped with genuinely massive light-detecting eyes, and the Antarctic toothfish, that powerful, shark-like apex predator we met just a couple chapters ago, are not simply two separate, isolated giants living quietly and independently in the same general ocean. They are directly, actively hunting one another, locked together in an ongoing predator and prey relationship that plays out again and again in the crushing darkness far below the surface. This dynamic has genuinely captured public attention and interest, with some researchers half-jokingly, half-seriously describing it as an ongoing deep-sea rivalry between two of the ocean's most formidable, most fascinating giants. And based directly on the physical evidence recovered from actual toothfish catches over the years, it appears this particular rivalry plays out on a genuinely regular, ongoing basis, far more often than most people would probably ever expect or assume. But this predator and prey relationship works meaningfully in both directions. The Antarctic toothfish is not always simply the helpless victim in this ongoing story. Sometimes, it successfully turns the tables and becomes the direct hunter instead. And that surprising reversal sets up one of the single, most genuinely fascinating rivalries found anywhere in the entire Southern Ocean. Deep beneath the Southern Ocean surface, two of this ecosystem's most formidable, most impressive giants are locked together in an ongoing, genuinely fascinating rivalry. The colossal squid and the Antarctic toothfish do not simply share the same general deep-water habitat peacefully. They actively hunt, prey on, and compete directly against one another, again and again, in the crushing darkness far below. We already learned that colossal squid regularly target and successfully hunt Antarctic toothfish as a significant, reliable food source. But researchers studying this specific relationship in careful detail have discovered that the reverse genuinely happens too. Antarctic toothfish have been documented directly feeding on colossal squid, including specimens that were already injured, weakened, or dying from some other cause. In a genuinely fitting, almost poetic twist, this sometimes even includes toothfish feeding on colossal squid that had themselves been previously injured during a failed, unsuccessful predation attempt targeting a different, more fortunate toothfish elsewhere. One marine biologist who has studied this specific predator relationship closely put it in genuinely simple, direct terms. Given the overall size of a fully adult colossal squid, the Antarctic toothfish is very likely its single most common and reliable prey species, primarily because there simply are not many other deep-sea fish of comparable size and availability found anywhere else around Antarctica. This creates a genuinely unusual, dynamic ecological relationship where both animals function as both predator and prey simultaneously, depending entirely on the specific circumstances, timing, and relative size or condition of each individual animal involved in any particular encounter. It is not remotely a simple, one-directional relationship where one giant always dominates while the other one always loses out. It is a genuine, ongoing, back-and-forth rivalry, playing out repeatedly across countless individual encounters deep within the frozen darkness. Researchers believe this specific dynamic likely plays a genuinely significant role in shaping the overall population and behaviour of both species over time. Colossal squid populations may directly influence toothfish population numbers and behaviour patterns through sustained, ongoing predation pressure. Toothfish, in turn, may directly influence colossal squid populations through their own occasional predation and general competition for the exact same available prey resources scattered throughout this shared deep water environment. This entire relationship also genuinely helps explain why both species have evolved the specific, specialized physical traits that we have already carefully explored throughout this story so far. The colossal squid's genuinely massive light-detecting eyes likely help it successfully detect approaching Antarctic toothfish from a meaningful distance away in the darkness. The Antarctic toothfish's own specialized sensory organs likely help it detect and effectively avoid an ambush attack from a patiently waiting squid before it strikes. Two giants, shaped and refined by the exact same freezing ocean, lock together in an ongoing rivalry that most people have honestly never even heard about before now. It is a genuinely stark, powerful reminder that even in an environment already famous for producing giants, the fundamental struggle for survival never actually stops or slows down, not even for a single moment. But there is one predator in this entire ecosystem that hunts colossal squid directly, one whose body carries permanent, visible physical evidence of exactly how intense and violent these specific underwater battles can genuinely become, and that evidence is written directly across its skin. Sperm whales are among the deepest diving mammals found anywhere on planet Earth, capable of descending well over a mile straight down into the crushing darkness in active pursuit of one very particular prey species. And when researchers examine the skin of these genuinely massive whales up close, they frequently find something genuinely striking. Circular, sucker-shaped scars, sometimes covering significant, extensive portions of the whale's entire body. Scientists believe these particular scars come directly from violent, prolonged underwater struggles with colossal squid. The colossal squid's arms and tentacles are lined with rows of sharp, rotating hooks, a genuinely unusual, distinctive feature compared to many other squid species, which typically rely on smooth suction cups alone instead. When a sperm whale successfully catches and attempts to physically subdue a colossal squid, the squid frequently fights back with real, genuine intensity, its hooked appendages tearing directly into the whale's skin as it desperately struggles to escape and survive. The resulting scars can remain clearly visible on a sperm whale's body for years afterward, offering researchers genuinely valuable, tangible physical evidence of exactly how intense and violent these specific underwater confrontations must actually be, even though virtually nobody has ever successfully filmed or directly witnessed one of these battles actually happening in real time. This particular predator and prey relationship represents one of the single most dramatic high-stakes encounters found anywhere across this entire frozen ocean. On one side, a sperm whale, capable of diving to genuinely extreme depths and generating enough raw physical force to successfully subdue prey weighing hundreds of pounds. On the other side, a colossal squid, equipped with those massive, highly sensitive light-detecting eyes and a set of genuinely formidable hooked weapons built directly into its own powerful arms and tentacles. Scientists studying sperm whale diet have found that colossal squid make up a genuinely significant portion of what these whales actually eat in Antarctic waters specifically. Researchers examining the specific contents of sperm whale stomachs have discovered that colossal squid beaks, the one hard, genuinely durable part of a squid's body that survives digestion largely intact, represent a meaningful percentage of all the squid beaks recovered and identified from these particular whales. This particular predator relationship also reveals something genuinely important about how researchers actually study an animal as elusive and difficult to observe as the colossal squid. Live specimens are exceptionally rare to encounter safely and directly, but the physical evidence these animals leave behind, whether that means visible scars on a sperm whale's skin or preserved beaks recovered from a whale's stomach contents, offers a genuinely valuable, indirect window into a creature that would otherwise remain almost completely unknown and unobserved. Sometimes the sperm whale successfully wins this violent underwater confrontation, diving back toward the surface with a genuinely significant meal secured. Sometimes, the colossal squid manages to successfully escape instead, carrying its own new physical injuries as permanent evidence of the encounter. And based purely on the physical evidence recovered so far, it appears these two genuinely massive predators have been locked in this exact same underwater battle for a very long time indeed. But scars and recovered beak fragments only tell part of this particular story. To understand exactly how much scientists have actually learned about colossal squid through this specific predator relationship, we need to look directly inside the one place where the clearest evidence has consistently been found. Throughout this entire story so far, we have watched the colossal squid function as a patient, genuinely formidable predator, hunting Antarctic toothfish and using those massive eyes to detect danger and prey alike from a meaningful distance away in the crushing darkness. But even a predator this large and this well adapted has its own natural predators to worry about in turn. And the sperm whale stands as its single, most significant, most persistent natural threat found anywhere in the Southern Ocean. Sperm whales are specifically built for deep water hunting in ways that few other animals on this entire planet can genuinely match. They can hold their breath for well over an hour at a time, dive to depths exceeding 1 mile straight down, and use a highly sophisticated form of echolocation, essentially a biological sonar system, to successfully detect potential prey moving somewhere in the total, complete darkness that surrounds them at those genuinely extreme depths. For a colossal squid, this makes the sperm whale a genuinely serious, persistent threat, even for an animal weighing over 1,000 pounds and equipped with the largest eyes found anywhere across the entire animal kingdom. Sperm whale echolocation does not rely on visible light at all, meaning even the colossal squid's own genuinely impressive eyesight offers relatively little meaningful protection once a hunting whale has already successfully locked onto its specific location using sound alone. Researchers studying sperm whale stomach contents have found that colossal squid represent a genuinely disproportionately large source of overall food energy for these whales, despite squid beaks themselves making up a comparatively smaller percentage of the total number of individual squid beaks recovered and carefully identified. This specific pattern suggests that while sperm whales may hunt several different squid species overall, the colossal squid specifically, due to its genuinely enormous individual body size, likely provides a significantly larger, more substantial meal each and every time a successful hunt actually occurs. This particular predator relationship reveals something genuinely important about the overall Southern Ocean food web that we have already explored in various different forms throughout this entire story. Even the largest, most formidable giants living in this ecosystem still have their own natural predators to contend with. The colossal squid hunts Antarctic toothfish successfully, The sperm whale, in turn, hunts the colossal squid itself. Nothing in this particular ecosystem sits completely, permanently safe at the very top of the food chain, not even the animals equipped with the most massive eyes, or the sharpest hooked weapons, or the most patient, energy-efficient hunting strategies. This constant, ongoing cycle of predator becoming prey, and prey occasionally becoming predator in turn, plays out repeatedly across nearly every single species we have already explored throughout this entire story. Leopard seals hunt penguins successfully, but orcas hunt leopard seals in turn. Antarctic toothfish hunt smaller fish and squid, but colossal squid hunt toothfish right back. Colossal squid hunt toothfish successfully, but sperm whales hunt colossal squid in turn. It is a genuinely complex, deeply interconnected web, not a simple, straightforward ladder with one single species sitting permanently and safely at the very top. And piecing together exactly how all of these different relationships actually connect and interact with one another has required one of the single most genuinely creative, resourceful areas of scientific research found anywhere in all of marine biology. Because studying an animal that almost nobody has ever successfully seen alive in its natural deep sea habitat requires looking in some genuinely unexpected, unconventional places for reliable evidence and information. How exactly do scientists study an animal that almost nobody has ever successfully observed alive in its natural deep sea habitat? For the colossal squid, a significant portion of the answer comes from a genuinely unexpected, surprising place: the stomach contents of the animals that regularly hunt and eat it. When a sperm whale successfully catches and consumes a colossal squid, most of the animal's soft body tissue eventually gets fully digested away. But one specific part reliably survives the digestive process largely intact: the squid's beak, a hard, genuinely durable structure made from the exact same kind of tough material found in a bird's actual beak. These beaks accumulate steadily inside a sperm whale's stomach over time, sometimes for years, and researchers who carefully examine the stomach contents of whales, whether from natural strandings or other research contexts, can recover and study them directly. Each individual recovered beak offers scientists a genuinely valuable, tangible clue. Beak size can help researchers estimate the overall size of the specific squid it originally came from, since beak dimensions reliably scale up in fairly predictable proportion to overall body size across most squid species studied so far. By carefully studying enough individual beaks collected over time, researchers can begin building a genuinely meaningful, if still admittedly incomplete, picture of the overall colossal squid population, including realistic size ranges that might extend well beyond what has actually been directly observed and measured in any single confirmed specimen so far. This particular research method has led to some genuinely fascinating, if still appropriately unconfirmed, findings. Some recovered beak fragments suggest they originally came from squid noticeably larger than any confirmed specimen ever weighed and measured directly by researchers. This raises a genuinely intriguing possibility. Colossal squid even larger than the biggest confirmed specimen may currently be swimming somewhere out there in the deep, crushing darkness of the Southern Ocean, never yet directly encountered, weighed, or measured by human researchers. Scientists are appropriately careful and cautious here, and we should be too. A larger recovered beak fragment does not automatically prove with absolute certainty that an even larger living squid definitely exists somewhere out there right now. Beak measurements involve legitimate estimation and reasonable extrapolation, and different individual squid could theoretically have slightly different specific beak-to-body size ratios depending on age or other factors. But the genuine possibility remains a real, serious, scientifically credible one, actively discussed and debated within the wider marine biology research community today. This particular research approach reveals something genuinely important about how scientists study creatures that live in genuinely extreme, difficult-to-access environments. Sometimes, the most direct, straightforward approach, simply searching for and trying to observe the animal alive out in open water, is not remotely practical or realistic given the sheer depth, darkness, and general remoteness involved. Instead, researchers have to get genuinely creative, piecing together a clearer overall picture from indirect evidence, accidentally recovered specimens, and the recovered stomach contents of the specific predators that hunt these elusive creatures directly. The colossal squid remains one of the single most genuinely mysterious large animals still alive on planet Earth today, studied primarily and extensively through the evidence it unintentionally leaves behind rather than through direct, sustained observation of live, healthy specimens swimming freely in their own natural habitat. And that evidence increasingly suggests something genuinely significant. What scientists have already confirmed and directly measured so far might not even represent the true, full, upper size limit of what is actually swimming somewhere out there in the deep, dark Southern Ocean right now. This raises an obvious, natural next question. If colossal squid larger than any confirmed specimen might genuinely exist somewhere out there, what other undiscovered giants could still be hiding right now in this genuinely vast, largely unexplored ocean? Everything we have explored throughout this entire story so far comes directly from confirmed, carefully measured specimens, or from indirect but genuinely credible scientific evidence, like recovered beak fragments or documented physical scars. But the Southern Ocean remains one of the single least explored, least studied environments found anywhere across the entire planet, and that genuinely raises an obvious natural question. What else might still be hiding down there, waiting to be properly discovered? Consider the sheer overall scale involved here. The Southern Ocean covers millions of square miles of open water, and significant portions of it remain almost entirely unexplored by direct human research, particularly the genuinely deep, dark regions found far below where sunlight can ever meaningfully reach. Extreme cold, crushing water pressure, and near total complete darkness combine together to make sustained, thorough research here genuinely difficult, expensive, and logistically challenging in ways that few other environments on Earth can really compare to. We already learned that some recovered colossal squid beak fragments suggest specimens noticeably larger than any confirmed, directly measured animal found so far. This same basic pattern likely applies to other species we have already explored throughout this story as well. Scientists studying giant sea spiders acknowledge there is still real, genuine debate about the true overall upper size limit for these specific animals. Researchers studying the ancient giant sponges acknowledge there is still meaningful, honest uncertainty in their overall age estimates. Even krill population totals carry a real acknowledged range of scientific uncertainty, rather than one single, perfectly fixed, agreed upon number. This honest uncertainty is not remotely a weakness in the underlying science itself. It is simply an accurate, honest reflection of exactly how genuinely difficult this particular environment truly is to study directly and thoroughly. Researchers are working with limited access, limited overall data, and genuinely extreme physical conditions that actively make every single new discovery here feel more like a rare gift than a routine, expected outcome. Some scientists specifically studying polar gigantism believe there could be entire species living in these frozen waters that have not even been formally discovered or scientifically described yet. The deep sea, in general, remains one of the least explored environments found anywhere on Earth, and the Southern Ocean's genuinely extreme conditions make it an even greater, more significant research challenge than most other deep ocean regions studied so far. This possibility genuinely captures something important about the overall spirit of scientific exploration and discovery. Every single giant creature we have carefully explored throughout this entire story, from the dinner plate-sized sea spider all the way to the colossal squid with its massive eyes, was once completely unknown to human science until a dedicated researcher somewhere finally found it, carefully studied it, and shared that new discovery with the wider world. The Southern Ocean has already revealed some genuinely extraordinary secrets to careful, patient researchers willing to brave its genuinely extreme conditions. But based on everything we currently understand and everything scientists are still actively working to confirm, it seems entirely likely that this remote, frozen ocean is still holding on to plenty of secrets it has not fully revealed just yet. There is one more genuinely important piece to this entire story though, and it is not remotely about discovering brand new giants. It is about whether the giants we have already found manage to survive long enough into the future for anyone to actually keep studying them at all. Everything we have explored throughout this entire story rests on one specific, genuinely delicate balance. Cold water, high dissolved oxygen levels, slowed, energy-efficient metabolism, remove or meaningfully disrupt any single one of those three specific pieces, and the entire system supporting these remarkable giants could genuinely begin to break down. That balance is not remotely guaranteed to last forever, unchanged. Ocean temperatures around the world are gradually rising, and the Southern Ocean is not remotely immune to that same broader global pattern, despite being genuinely one of the coldest, most remote ocean regions found anywhere on the entire planet. Even relatively small, seemingly modest increases in overall water temperature can meaningfully affect exactly how much oxygen that same water is actually capable of holding, since, as we already learned several chapters back, warmer water simply holds less dissolved oxygen than colder water does. Researchers specifically studying giant Antarctic sea spiders have directly tested exactly how these animals respond to warmer water temperatures under carefully controlled laboratory conditions. Their genuinely important findings suggest that these giants may be particularly vulnerable and sensitive to rising temperatures, precisely because their entire specialized biology has become so completely, specifically adapted to cold, oxygen-rich water over such an extraordinarily long evolutionary timescale. Warmer water does not just feel different or unfamiliar to these specific animals, it could genuinely, meaningfully threaten their fundamental ability to breathe efficiently and survive at all. This finding connects directly and clearly back to that original, central mystery we first introduced near the very beginning of this entire story. If oxygen-rich, cold water really does turn out to be the essential key ingredient behind polar gigantism, then warming water threatens far more than simple comfort or convenience for these animals. It could threaten the fundamental biological mechanism that allows these creatures to reach such genuinely extraordinary sizes in the first place. This does not mean giant sea spiders, ancient sponges, or any of the other remarkable creatures we have explored throughout this story are about to suddenly disappear tomorrow. Change on this particular scale, especially in an ecosystem already famous for operating on genuinely extended timescales, like that sponge that barely grew at all across 22 full years, typically happens gradually, over many decades, rather than occurring instantly overnight. But scientists studying this ecosystem are genuinely, seriously paying close attention. The Southern Ocean represents one of the clearest, most direct real-world examples of exactly how interconnected temperature, oxygen availability, and biological survival truly are within a single ecosystem. What happens here over the coming decades could offer genuinely valuable insight into how other cold water ecosystems found elsewhere around the entire planet might eventually respond to similar warming trends and pressures in turn. This particular story does not have a single, neat, fully resolved ending just yet, and honestly, it probably should not. Real science rarely wraps up quite that cleanly or conveniently. What we do know for certain is this: the Southern Ocean's remarkable giants exist specifically because of a genuinely delicate, carefully balanced set of environmental conditions, refined and maintained over millions of years of gradual evolution. And that same delicate balance is now being genuinely tested by forces largely operating well beyond any single animal's direct control. The krill sitting at the very base of this entire remarkable ecosystem face that exact same genuine uncertainty, and what happens to them specifically could end up affecting absolutely everything else we have carefully explored throughout this entire story. We already learned that krill function as the literal keystone species holding together the entire Southern Ocean food web, the single foundation that nearly everything else in this remarkable ecosystem ultimately depends on to survive. That fact makes any meaningful, sustained change to krill populations genuinely significant, not just for krill themselves, but for practically every other species we have carefully explored throughout this entire story so far. Scientists carefully monitoring krill populations over several decades have documented real, measurable shifts happening over time. Some long-term studies covering multiple decades and drawing on data from numerous different countries working in Antarctica have found meaningful changes in overall krill abundance across certain specific regions of the Southern Ocean. In some of these same areas, populations of salps, gelatinous, jellyfish-like creatures that compete directly with krill for the exact same phytoplankton food source have meanwhile increased over that same general time frame. This particular shift matters significantly because salps are simply not an adequate biological substitute for krill within this specific food web. They are considerably less nutritious for the various predators that would otherwise be eating krill instead, and they do not remotely support the same overall level of biomass and energy transfer, moving up through the wider food chain. If krill populations were to meaningfully decline in certain specific regions, while salps correspondingly increased to take their place, predators throughout that entire local ecosystem could genuinely struggle to find adequate, sufficient nutrition, even if the water directly around them still appeared to be reasonably full of some form of drifting sea life. Consider the direct ripple effects involved here, several of which we have already carefully explored throughout different chapters in this story. Blue whales that migrate thousands of miles specifically to feed on dense, reliable krill swarms would arrive to find measurably less food actually waiting for them. Leopard seals that rely partly on krill as a meaningful part of their overall varied diet would need to hunt other specific prey species noticeably more often just to compensate. Penguins that depend heavily on krill to successfully feed their own hungry chicks could genuinely struggle to find enough adequate food during certain critical breeding seasons. Even the ancient giant sponges we explored earlier in this story could ultimately feel these same downstream effects. Remember that dramatic growth spurt triggered by a shifting food supply after a massive iceberg broke away nearby. That specific event highlighted just how directly connected these ancient creatures actually are to overall changes in phytoplankton and nutrient availability throughout their surrounding environment, the exact same base resource that krill themselves depend on completely to survive. Scientists are not remotely predicting some sudden, dramatic, overnight ecosystem collapse happening here. The full picture remains genuinely complex, and krill populations naturally fluctuate somewhat from year to year, even under normal expected conditions, for a whole range of different natural reasons. But the sustained, longer-term trends researchers have documented over multiple decades are concerning enough that active, ongoing monitoring and international conservation efforts specifically targeting krill populations have become a genuinely significant, serious priority within the wider scientific and conservation community today. The Southern Ocean's remarkable giants, the sea spiders, the ancient sponges, the colossal squid, and every other creature we have carefully explored throughout this entire story, all ultimately depend, whether directly or indirectly, on this same delicate ecological foundation remaining genuinely stable and intact over time. Protecting krill populations effectively is not remotely just about protecting one single small, easily overlooked species. It is about protecting the entire, deeply interconnected system that produces every single remarkable giant we have explored together throughout this whole journey. This brings us to one final, genuinely important truth about the Southern Ocean, one that ties this entire remarkable story together completely. Compare the Southern Ocean directly to nearly any other ocean region found anywhere else on the entire planet. Coastlines elsewhere are heavily developed, often crowded with cities, ports, and extensive industry. Shipping lanes crisscross constantly back and forth across the open water. Fishing fleets from countless different nations actively work these waters year-round without any significant pause. The Southern Ocean is genuinely different in several important, meaningful ways. No permanent human population lives directly on Antarctica itself. No coastal cities exist anywhere along its icy shoreline. The specific research stations scattered sparsely across the continent house relatively small numbers of scientists at any given time, and even reaching this remote region at all typically requires a lengthy, genuinely difficult journey by specialized ship or aircraft. This remains, in a very real, meaningful sense, one of the last genuinely wild, largely untouched ocean environments still found anywhere on the entire planet. This relative remoteness and isolation has helped directly protect and preserve the genuinely unusual ecosystem we have carefully explored throughout this entire story. The giant sea spiders, the ancient sponges, the colossal squid, all of these remarkable creatures have been able to evolve and thrive here largely undisturbed by the kind of direct, sustained human pressure and habitat destruction that has already dramatically reshaped so many other ocean ecosystems found elsewhere around the world. But remote does not mean completely, permanently untouched or immune from outside influence. commercial fishing operations, including the specific krill fisheries we discussed just a couple chapters back, do actively operate in certain designated parts of the Southern Ocean under carefully regulated international agreements. Climate change, as we already carefully explored, does not remotely stop or slow down, simply because a particular ocean region happens to be remote or genuinely difficult to reach. And plastic pollution, tragically, has already been found even in some of the most genuinely remote, isolated ocean environments studied anywhere on the entire planet. International cooperation has played a genuinely significant role in helping protect this remarkable, unique ecosystem so far. Multiple different nations actively work together through established international agreements specifically designed to help regulate fishing, protect wildlife, and carefully limit various other human activities across significant portions of the Southern Ocean. This kind of sustained, ongoing international cooperation is genuinely rare in most other parts of the world's oceans, and it reflects a shared, widespread recognition that this particular ecosystem is genuinely worth carefully protecting for the long term. The scientists who study this remarkable region, the ones drilling carefully through thick sea ice to study giant sea spiders, the ones taking painstaking core samples from ancient sponges, the ones carefully tracking krill populations using satellites orbiting high above the Earth, are not simply satisfying pure scientific curiosity alone. They are helping the wider world understand and appreciate a genuinely unique ecosystem before it potentially changes in ways that cannot ever be fully reversed or undone. The Southern Ocean has already given careful, patient researchers some of the single most remarkable, genuinely surprising discoveries found anywhere across the entire natural world. A spider the size of a dinner plate. A sponge potentially older than written human history itself. A squid with eyes larger than any other animal on the entire planet. And based on everything we now understand, it seems entirely likely there is still considerably more waiting to be properly discovered here. We began this entire story with one single central question. How does an ocean this genuinely cold manage to grow monsters this genuinely big? We have now explored that answer carefully, piece by piece, chapter by chapter. But one final, deeper question still remains. We have travelled through an entire remarkable ocean together throughout this story. We have met a spider the size of a dinner plate, an isopod built like a small armoured tank, and a sponge that might have started growing before the pyramids of Egypt were built. We have watched leopard seals hunt penguins with real precision, orcas coordinate genuinely sophisticated group hunts, and a colossal squid with eyes larger than any other animal on the entire planet. And through all of it, one central, unifying explanation kept reappearing again and again. Cold water holds more oxygen. Cold slows metabolism significantly. Together, these two specific factors seem to unlock genuinely extraordinary growth and remarkably extended lifespans that would simply be biologically impossible almost anywhere else on the entire planet. But here is the genuinely honest truth, the one careful scientists themselves openly acknowledge. Polar gigantism as an overall phenomenon is still not completely, fully understood or resolved. The oxygen temperature explanation we have carefully traced throughout this entire story represents the single strongest, most well-supported theory scientists currently have. But it does not perfectly explain every single individual case, and some specific researchers believe there are likely additional factors still involved that have not been fully identified or understood yet. Why do some specific species grow to such genuinely extreme sizes in these cold waters, while other, closely related species living in that exact same environment do not follow that same clear pattern nearly as strongly? Why do certain specific giants, like those ancient sponges we explored several chapters back, grow almost impossibly slowly over time, while others, like the sea spiders, appear to reach their own genuinely extreme sizes comparatively faster? These specific questions do not yet have fully complete, satisfying answers, and honest, careful researchers are genuinely still working diligently to figure them out. This kind of open, honest uncertainty is not remotely a weakness in the underlying science itself. It is simply what real, ongoing scientific discovery actually looks like in practice. every single confirmed fact we have carefully explored throughout this entire journey, the sea spider's genuinely extreme size, the sponge's staggering potential age, the sheer overall scale of a massive krill swarm was once a completely unanswered question itself, patiently investigated and gradually solved by dedicated, careful researchers working over years, sometimes even entire decades, of sustained effort. The Southern Ocean remains one of the single most genuinely mysterious, least explored environments found anywhere on this entire planet, hiding creatures and phenomena that continue to genuinely surprise even the most experienced, most knowledgeable scientists who have dedicated their entire careers to studying it closely. Every single new expedition down there has real, meaningful potential to uncover something else genuinely unexpected, something that could meaningfully reshape our overall understanding of this remarkable ecosystem all over again. So here is the real, honest question this entire story ultimately leaves us with. If an ocean this genuinely cold, this remote, and this difficult to properly study has already revealed giants this genuinely extraordinary, what else might still be quietly waiting down there in the darkness, patiently, for someone brave and curious enough to finally go looking? The ice has already given up some genuinely remarkable secrets, but based on everything we have carefully explored together throughout this entire journey, it seems entirely, genuinely likely that the Southern Ocean is not even close to finish surprising us yet.